And President Tinubu has appointed new service chiefs with marching orders to restore security and peace across Nigeria. The Senate is very likely to approve them this week, which brings a focus back to the country's security challenges. And there are many lessons, some say, from the Buhari administration's handling of Nigeria's security issues, and many are also looking to see what this president will do differently. Joining me now from Abuja is Baba Yusuf, strategist and policy analyst. Thank you so much, Baba Yusuf, for joining me on Politics HQ. Good evening.
Thank you for having me, Tolu. It's a pleasure. Good evening, Nigeria.
All right. Because of time, I want us to get straight to the points, because there was a lot of criticism that former President Muhammadu Buhari faced when it came to how his service chiefs handled the country's security issues and even how he picked the service chiefs. So in terms of lessons, let's quickly start from there. What lessons do you think the Tinubu administration should learn from what the Buhari administration did wrong and what it possibly also did right?
Thank you very much. First lesson, I think, is being addressed by President Tinubu. The time factor, very critical. We are very, very much behind schedule, behind time to tackle this cankerworm of hydra-headed insecurity issue. So the lesson is being learned. Mr. President has appointed the service chiefs. He has appointed the National Security Advisor for the service chiefs, subject to the, ratification by the Senate. So that critical timing factor in terms of appointment of the service chiefs has been addressed. Second lesson, also, Mr. President has addressed the way and manner the service chiefs were selected and appointed. Even though one may argue, even for the predecessors, when the appointments are made, you hear accolades with regards to the CVs and resumes of these professionals. But indeed, I say a taste of the pudding is in the eating. But then suffice it to say, Mr. President has made, we believe, the right choice, round pegs in round holes. We are waiting to see how everything play out in the short to long term.
So when we look at the issues the Buhari administration faced, and many have talked about what is now the multidimensional aspect of Nigeria's security challenges, you're still dealing with banditry in the north and north central in certain areas. You're dealing with continued clashes between farmers and herdsmen. You have what is an insurgency, and some saying, of course, an attempt at secession in other parts of the country. There's kidnapping, there's armed robbery. You have, of course, issues with the militants in the Niger Delta that seem to be coming up. But it looks like it is being handled by the President Tinubu administration. When we look at the main security challenges that you think will be at the table of this administration, what do you think they are?
You've already listed it, Tolu, but importantly, I think what is the main challenge on the table of Mr. President is to look at the existing national security strategy and see with the new team to review to see if there are areas to improve and if there are, new things to bring in, and also to hit the ground running with regards to execution. Also, while we are at it, if you recall, during the build-up to the elections, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, on the platform of All Progressives Congress, rolled out what is termed the Renewed Hope Agenda, which is his manifesto and the promise he made to Nigerians. And if I may go to that, there's a chapter where Mr. President talked about the promise he made with regards to national security. And if I go there, I took some notes. You have what he said clearly to redefine. One of the steps he will take, the strategist, is to redefine the military doctrine and practice, to look at improving the critical national infrastructure, and to have what is called the anti-terrorism battalion, upgrading communication, upgrading the technology to drive, the entire, fight against terrorism, improving technology, like I said, and self-surveillance, et cetera, et cetera. I believe Mr. President, now being on the hot seat, will try to align what he promised in the Renewed Hope Agenda and what he is now seeing as what is the reality facing him with regards to, first of all, the national security and the security briefings he got from the immediate past service chiefs, and of course, the update he will get from the newly appointed service chief that will be coordinated by the National Security Advisor, Malam Nuhu Ribadu. So that is the task ahead of Mr. President. I believe these discussions have been going on. We saw his initial critical step where he visited the NSA's office and reviewed the war room that has been set up there in the National Security Advisor's Office. And the marching order he gave to the service chiefs at that time, which remains a subsisting order, that there must be interagency collaboration and synergy in fighting corruption in Nigeria. So I think the job has been cut out for Mr. President. Yeah. He's good to go. We wait to see how things play out in the coming days.
So I want to use a specific issue, and that's food inflation, to talk about sort of those interconnections that many of us have made between security and certain things that are affecting Nigerians. So food inflation has been quite high for a few months now, in fact, into going into a year, if not more. And this particular one, there are many who link it to the security for farmers across the country. Let's even leave aside the transportation issues, storage issues that we have, but particularly linked to the inability of farmers to go to their farms, to harvest when they need to harvest, and also to sow when they need to sow. So if we see an adequate, even more than adequate addressing of security, what areas do you think Nigerians will start to see the benefits that are just more than us talking about security? We'll see, hopefully, food prices coming down. What else are some of those indirect or connections that we expect to see with security being adequately handled?
I expect to see some quick wins churned out from the entire strategy, national security strategy blueprint, I mean the improved one, with regards to how President Bola Tinubu need to consolidate, stabilize and consolidate moving forward. Incidentally, he's taking over the mantle of leadership during the rainy season. We know in most part of the agrarian communities in Nigeria, especially in northern Nigeria, where these terrorists, I term them all under terrorists, whether they are bandits or kidnappers, whatever they are terrorists that now dictate the time farmers go to farm, and they give them levies to pay, and also sometimes take the entire produce away or burn them down. We want to see what actions will be taken by Mr. President's team in a tactical way to ensure there's a quick win for us to have farmers back in the farm, for them to produce the food and maybe close this gap. Albeit it may be marginal because it's starting at a time that I believe it should have started earlier than now, especially given the fact that we already have the tomato Ebola and other diseases that are ravaging, our agricultural products. Especially, you notice the price of tomato has skyrocketed. One is the demand and supply side of it with regards to the supply, and then one is due to the disease that is ravaging tomato. But essentially, we know that a lot of farmers are not able to go to their farms because of the threats issued by the terrorists, either asking for some particular sum of amount of money before they move to farms, or clearly because of fear, they don't even want to, hazard a move to go into the farms. So this is one of the things we want to see happen in this administration. It's already 1 month. We hope and pray that in the next couple of weeks, the service chiefs will demonstrate capacity, agility, and let us start seeing results in that regard, among other, impacts and outcomes we hope to see in the coming weeks.
Okay, so I need to ask you before I wrap up, this debate that we see seemingly reignited now between dialoguing with terrorists, bandits, kidnappers, militants, whatever name you want to give them, and using military force against these individuals. Now, we've had recent comments in just this day and in the past few days. Senator Yerima has visited the president. He says that he believes the federal government should, in fact, dialogue and negotiate with bandits. And we also heard from Senator Shehu Sani. He says that Nigeria cannot afford to dialogue. One, the bandits don't particularly work, or dialoguing with bandits doesn't work because there are a few reasons. One, they're not an armed movement that seems to be founded in pursuit of any religious, ethnic, or political causes, more than extortion and even atrocious blackmail. Then, of course, it seems they're not very united under a single leadership, but they seem to operate in clusters and criminal gangs. And then a lot of the motivation is money. So when it comes to having this administration use another tactic, military force versus possibly the power of dialogue, where do you put it? Is it an equal scale we're looking at here, given how dire the security situation is in Nigeria?
First of all, let us take a step back and ask ourselves, have negotiations happened before? And the answer is yes. If you recall, March 25, 2018, the former Minister of Aviation, just as a reference, told Nigerians, Alhaji Lai Mohammed mentioned the intention of government to negotiate with the Boko Haram, terrorist group, about the possible ceasefire or possible total, end to the issue. And also we know there's a renowned terrorist in around Zamfara Sokoto axis called Turji, who in 2022 actually surrendered and said he has denounced terrorism based on engagements and negotiations, and now he's back into the trenches. In fact, yesterday we saw in the news about 21 or so, victims have been rescued allegedly from the hands of Turji due to the pressure of bombardment by the Nigerian armed forces on his enclaves. So for me, if you ask me, negotiation with terrorists has been an ongoing conversation. The question is, if we are going to negotiate with terrorists, to what end? And what are we really intending to achieve? I don't mind engagement with some critical stakeholders to reach out, but we have also seen how that have turned out to be a pipeline, of another layer of extortion by the so-called middlemen that are engaging, to negotiate on behalf of the federal government. We have a gentleman that is in the custody of the DSS already, Mr. Mamu, that is undergoing investigation of using that opportunity to cash out. If you look at the issue, it's multidimensional, like you mentioned, and you didn't mention another critical dimension to this terrorist issue, Tolu. We have ISIS,
yes.
We have ISIL,
ISWAP,
we have
yes.
Boko Haram, that are international terrorist groups that have, penetrated into our territory. We have a scenario where when President Buhari took over in 2015, the focal point of this terrorism was northeastern Nigeria. 8 years down the line, they have spread out to north central, northeast, and they are moving down south. And like you mentioned, we have the separate agitations and other militancy going on in the south. So when you want to start negotiating, who do you start negotiating with in terms of this segment of terrorists? And the moment you start that, others will also make demands that you may not be able to, to satisfy. I reckon that within the framework of the national security strategy, I think chapter 4 or 5 talked about this social, social module of fighting corruption. I think that is the area that also the government should look at: national cohesion, national unity, the economic angle of it, and the political inclusion. These are very critical in terms of negotiation. But negotiating with those criminals and terrorist gangs, I don't think will take us to the next level. We need to move in, take them on. We have a new president. Let's use some actions. Let's eliminate these terrorists beyond rhetorics, beyond mantra, beyond negotiations.
All right, Baba Yusuf, strategist and policy analyst, thank you for your time. Unfortunately, time is not on our side. I would like to take this conversation further, but we look forward to seeing you back on Politics HQ. Thank you so much.
My pleasure anytime. Thank you for having me.
All right. And that's as far as we can go tonight because of time. But thank you so much for joining me on Politics HQ. And don't forget that here we keep you up to speed, up to date with all the latest politics happening in Africa's largest democracy. It's the largest country and, of course, its largest economy. I'm Tolulope. Adeleru-Balogun. Have a fantastic evening.